The strange thing about destiny is that it rarely arrives the way you expect. Sometimes it comes as a whisper beneath moonlight. Sometimes it comes wearing a pair of silver eyes you can never forget. Evelyn Harper sat alone beside the narrow window of her cottage while the last light of evening faded beyond the hills of Moon Hollow. The village was settling into its familiar rhythm. Lanterns glowed warmly behind distant windows. Families gathered around supper tables. Laughter drifted faintly through the cool spring air. But here at the edge of the forest, where the trees stood tall and silent beneath the rising moon, Evelyn was alone. She had been alone for a long time. Not unhappy, not bitter, simply alone. At 21 years old, she had learned how to fill quiet evenings with simple things. A crackling fire, a cup of tea, a basket of moonsilk thread resting beside her favorite chair. Most nights, she spent hours weaving scarves that she sold at the market each weekend. People admired her work. They complimented her skill. Then they returned to their own lives while Evelyn returned to hers. Tonight, however, one scarf remained unfinished in her lap. Soft blue thread shimmered beneath the firelight like pieces of the evening sky. It was different from the scarves she made for customers. This one was hers, the first she had ever woven entirely for herself. Her fingers moved gently across the fabric. Every stitch reminded her of her mother. Years ago, before illness had taken her away, they used to sit together beside this very fireplace. Her mother would tell stories while teaching her how to guide thread through patient fingers. Back then the cottage had felt larger, warmer, filled with laughter. Evelyn smiled sadly and pressed the scarf against her chest. "I think you would have liked this one," she whispered into the quiet room. The only answer was the soft crackle of burning wood. Outside, the moon climbed higher. Its silver light spilled across the forest and painted the world in pale shades of silver and blue. Evelyn stood, folded the scarf carefully, and draped it across the chair beside her bed. Then she extinguished the lantern and slipped beneath her quilt. Sleep came slowly. The forest wind brushed against the cottage walls. Branches swayed softly beyond the window. Somewhere in the distance an owl called into the night. Eventually her eyes closed. And then she was dreaming. Silver flowers stretched endlessly across a moonlit field. Their glowing petals moved like waves beneath a gentle breeze. Evelyn stood among them, barefoot and still. She had never seen this place before. Yet somehow it felt familiar, as if she had visited it many times and simply forgotten. Ahead of her stood a man dressed entirely in black. She could not see his face clearly. Moonlight seemed to blur every feature except one. His eyes, silver, bright as starlight reflected across water. He did not approach her. He did not speak. He simply stood there watching her with an expression she could not fully understand. There was sadness there, loneliness, and something else. Something that made her heart ache for reasons she could not explain. Slowly he raised one hand toward her. The gesture was small, gentle, as though he feared she might disappear if he moved too quickly. Evelyn felt an unexpected pull inside her chest. Every instinct urged her forward. One step, then another. The closer she moved, the stronger the feeling became. Not fear, not uncertainty, recognition, as though part of her already knew him, as though her heart remembered something her mind had forgotten. She opened her mouth to ask who he was. Suddenly the dream shattered. Evelyn woke with a sharp breath. Moonlight streamed through her bedroom window. Her pulse fluttered wildly beneath her ribs. For several seconds, she remained motionless, staring into the darkness. The dream felt impossibly real. The silver eyes lingered in her memory. The loneliness she had seen within them still tugged at her heart. Then movement outside the window caught her attention. Evelyn sat upright. Something stood in the garden, a large shadow among the moonflowers. She pushed aside the blanket and crossed the room. Cool floorboards pressed beneath her bare feet. As she stepped closer to the glass, the shadow emerged into the moonlight. Her breath caught. A wolf stood outside her cottage. Not an ordinary wolf. This creature was enormous. Its dark coat gleamed like midnight silk beneath the silver moon. Every line of its body seemed powerful and graceful at once. Yet it was not the size of the wolf that held her still. It was the eyes. Silver. The exact same silver from her dream. The wolf was staring directly at her. Neither moved. Neither looked away. For one impossible moment, the entire world seemed to fall silent. The wind disappeared. The forest disappeared. Even the sound of Evelyn's breathing faded. There were only those eyes, and the strange feeling spreading through her chest. Every sensible thought told her she should be frightened. Yet somehow she was not. Instead, she felt the same inexplicable pull she had felt in the dream. Familiar. Warm. Heartbreakingly familiar. The wolf remained there for several seconds, simply watching her window. Watching her, as though seeing her mattered more than anything else in the world. Then its gaze shifted toward the chair beside her bed. Evelyn followed its eyes. The chair was empty. Her blue scarf was gone. She turned back, just in time to see the wolf holding the scarf gently between its teeth. "Hey," she gasped. The wolf stepped backward toward the forest. Not hurried, not afraid, almost reluctant to leave. Evelyn rushed outside into the cool night air. "Wait," she called. The wolf paused at the edge of the trees. Moonlight danced across the blue scarf. Slowly it looked back one final time. Their eyes met, and for the briefest second, Evelyn felt as though an invisible thread had tightened between them. Then the wolf vanished into the shadows. She stood beneath the moon long after it was gone. Her scarf had been stolen. Yet strangely, that was not what troubled her most. What lingered was the feeling that somewhere beyond the dark forest, someone had spent years searching for her. And tonight, for the first time, they had finally found her. The following morning, Evelyn woke with the strange feeling that someone had spoken her name during the night. The cottage was quiet. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains and painted pale golden patterns across the floor. For a moment she remained in bed, staring at the empty chair beside her window. The blue scarf was still gone. Somehow that simple fact made the room feel different. Larger, colder, as if a piece of herself had disappeared along with it. She rose slowly and moved through her usual routine, but nothing felt quite the same. While preparing tea, she found herself glancing toward the forest. While sweeping the front porch, she caught herself listening for movement among the trees. By afternoon, she finally laughed at herself. It was ridiculous. A wolf had stolen her scarf. That should have been the end of the story. Yet every time she remembered those silver eyes, her heart reacted in a way she could not explain. That night the moon rose bright and full above Moon Hollow. Evelyn sat beside the window long after darkness settled across the village. Part of her expected the wolf to return. Another part hoped it would. Eventually fatigue pulled her toward sleep. The dream came almost immediately. She stood once again in the field of silver flowers. Moonlight shimmered across endless petals. The air felt warm against her skin. This time the man was closer. She could see the shape of his shoulders beneath a dark coat. She could see dark hair stirred by the breeze. Still, his face remained hidden within shifting silver light. Only his eyes were clear, silver, gentle, familiar. He looked at her as though she were something precious he feared losing. Evelyn felt the same strange pull inside her chest. Stronger now, deeper. "Who are you?" she whispered. For the first time, the man smiled. It was small and almost sad. He took a single step toward her. Then the dream dissolved like mist beneath sunlight. Miles away, beyond forests and mountains, another pair of silver eyes opened to darkness. Lucian Ashford sat upright in the silence of his private chamber. Moonlight spilled across stone walls and silver drapes. For several seconds he remained perfectly still. The dream lingered around him. A young woman standing among silver flowers. Soft brown hair touched by moonlight. Eyes filled with kindness and loneliness. He had seen her again. For months she had appeared in fragments. A glimpse, a smile, a voice. He could never quite hear. Yet after finding the blue scarf, the dreams had changed. They felt real now. Lucian lowered his gaze. Folded carefully beside him was the scarf. Moon silk shimmered beneath the pale light. His wolf had brought it back during the night. Again, he should have returned it immediately. Instead, he found himself reaching for it. The moment his fingers touched the fabric, a strange calm settled over him. The restless ache that had followed him for years eased. The silence inside his chest softened. Lucian frowned. Nothing should have affected him this way. Yet somehow it did. He looked toward the moonlit window. Somewhere beyond the horizon lived the woman who had woven this scarf. Somewhere she was sleeping beneath the same moon. And for the first time in a very long time, the Alpha King found himself thinking about someone other than duty, responsibility, or the burden of a crown. As the night deepened, neither Evelyn nor Lucian realized that they were dreaming of each other beneath the same sky. But destiny had already begun weaving its own thread between them, one careful stitch at a time. For the first time in years, Alpha King Lucian Ashford found himself distracted. The council chamber was filled with voices discussing trade routes, harvest reports, and preparations for the coming summer season. Yet the words seemed distant. His attention drifted again and again to the folded blue scarf resting inside a carved wooden box beside his desk. The meeting continued around him while his thoughts wandered hundreds of miles away to a small cottage on the edge of a forest. That alone should have concerned him. Lucian had spent most of his life mastering discipline. Duty came before comfort. Responsibility came before desire. The kingdom depended on him, and he had never allowed personal feelings to interfere with the weight of the crown. Yet something about the scarf refused to leave his mind. Later that evening, after the palace halls had grown quiet, Lucian returned to his private chamber. Moonlight spilled through tall windows overlooking distant mountains. He opened the wooden box and carefully lifted the scarf into his hands. The moon silk shimmered softly beneath the silver glow. The moment his fingers touched the fabric, a familiar calm settled over him. The restless tension that usually followed him through every waking hour eased once more. Even the strange loneliness he had carried for years seemed quieter. Lucian exhaled slowly. He had searched every explanation he could find. None made sense. A scarf should not possess this kind of effect. Yet each time he held it, the world felt steadier, more complete. His wolf felt it too. Deep within him, the creature that usually paced restlessly through his thoughts became unusually still whenever the scent lingered nearby. It was not merely curiosity anymore. It was a pull, a need to understand. Meanwhile, in Moon Hollow, Evelyn sat outside her cottage beneath a clear evening sky. A basket of moon silk rested beside her chair as she watched the stars appear one by one above the forest. The village had settled into peaceful silence. Yet her thoughts remained anything but peaceful. She had spent the entire day wondering about the dream, about the man, about the wolf. Every time she closed her eyes, she remembered the sadness hidden behind those silver eyes. More than once she caught herself glancing toward the forest, hoping to see a dark figure standing among the trees. It never appeared. Somehow that disappointed her more than she wanted to admit. A gentle breeze brushed through the garden. Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself and looked toward the moon hanging above the forest canopy. "Who are you?" she whispered softly. The question disappeared into the night. Yet somewhere deep inside, she felt certain that the answer was getting closer. Back at the palace, Lucian stepped onto a stone balcony overlooking the sleeping kingdom. The moon hung high above the horizon, identical to the one shining over Moon Hollow. For reasons he could not explain, he found himself looking north, toward distant forests, toward a village he had never visited, toward the woman who appeared in his dreams. His grip tightened slightly around the folded scarf. Then a decision settled quietly inside him. He would find her, not because of destiny, not because of prophecy, not because of duty, simply because every path his thoughts traveled eventually led back to her. And far away beneath the same moon, Evelyn suddenly felt an unexpected warmth bloom inside her chest, as though someone she had never met had just taken the first step toward her. 3 days after deciding to find the owner of the blue scarf, Lucian finally arrived in Moon Hollow disguised as an ordinary traveler. The journey had taken longer than expected, not because he lacked direction, but because every mile seemed to sharpen the strange anticipation growing inside him. By the time the village appeared between rolling green hills, dark clouds had gathered overhead. Rain began as a light mist and quickly became a steady spring shower. Villagers hurried indoors as the sky darkened. Lucian pulled the hood of his traveling coat lower and continued walking through the rain. He had faced royal courts, difficult negotiations, and responsibilities that carried the weight of an entire kingdom. Yet somehow the thought of meeting one unknown woman made his pulse feel less steady than any of those things. Across the village, Evelyn was securing flower boxes beneath her cottage window when the storm arrived. Wind rattled the porch railing and scattered loose petals across the yard. She gathered the last basket from outside and stepped back under the shelter of the porch roof. That was when she noticed a lone figure walking along the muddy road. The traveler moved through the rain with quiet determination, though the weather had clearly caught him by surprise. For reasons she could not explain, her attention remained fixed on him. Something about him felt familiar. A sudden gust of wind swept across the road. The traveler glanced toward her cottage. Their eyes met. Evelyn froze. Even from several yards away, she recognized the silver eyes immediately. The same eyes from her dreams. The same eyes she had seen beneath moonlight. Her heart stumbled. The traveler stopped as well. For a brief moment, neither moved. Rain fell steadily between them. Then another gust of wind rattled the trees and broke the strange spell. Evelyn found her voice first. "You should come out of the rain." The words escaped before she could think about them. The traveler hesitated. Then he approached the porch. Water glistened along dark strands of hair escaping his hood. Up close, he looked older than she expected, carrying a quiet confidence beneath his calm expression. Yet there was also a loneliness in his eyes she immediately recognized from her dreams. "Thank you," he said. His voice was warm and familiar in a way that made her chest tighten. "The storm arrived faster than I expected." Evelyn opened the cottage door. "You can wait inside until it passes." The traveler stepped into the warmth of the cottage. The scent of tea and burning wood filled the room. For a moment he simply looked around, taking in the shelves of yarn, the woven blankets, and the peaceful simplicity of the place. Something softened in his expression. "This is beautiful," he said quietly. Evelyn felt herself smile. Most people would not describe it that way. Then most people are not paying attention. The answer surprised both of them. Silence followed, comfortable rather than awkward. Rain tapped gently against the windows while firelight danced across the room. Evelyn poured tea into 2 cups and offered one to him. Their fingers brushed briefly during the exchange. A strange warmth spread through both of them. Neither commented on it. Instead, they settled into quiet conversation beside the fireplace. They spoke about small things at first. The village, the weather, the surrounding forests. Yet every minute felt strangely effortless, as though they were continuing a conversation that had begun long ago. Outside, the storm slowly faded. Inside, neither seemed eager for it to end. For the first time in years, Lucien found himself forgetting the burdens waiting beyond Moon Hollow. And for the first time since her mother's passing, Evelyn felt as though the empty spaces in her life were not quite so empty. When the rain finally softened to a gentle drizzle, neither realized that destiny had already taken another step forward, weaving their paths together more tightly than either of them could yet understand. The days that followed passed more quickly than either Evelyn or Lucien expected. What began as a chance meeting during a rainstorm slowly turned into a quiet routine neither of them wanted to question. Each afternoon, Lucien found a reason to remain in Moon Hollow a little longer. Each evening, Evelyn found herself hoping he would appear at her cottage door. Neither spoke about it. Neither needed to. Some things revealed themselves in smaller ways. In shared smiles. In comfortable silences. In the strange ease they felt whenever they were together. One evening, golden sunlight lingered across the hills long after the workday ended. Evelyn sat on the porch steps sorting bundles of moon silk, while Lucien repaired a loose wooden latch beside the garden gate. The simple scene should have felt ordinary. Yet for both of them, it felt surprisingly precious. "You are staring again," Evelyn said without looking up. Lucien glanced toward her. "Am I?" A smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "You have been looking at the same bundle of yarn for nearly a minute." Lucien laughed softly. "Perhaps I was distracted." Evelyn finally looked up. Their eyes met. For a moment the world seemed to grow quieter. The familiar warmth returned immediately. It always did. Neither understood why. Neither truly wanted to. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, Lucien helped carry supplies inside before preparing to leave. The walk back toward the village should not have felt difficult. Yet every evening it became harder. He found himself turning back for one last glance at the cottage. More often than not, Evelyn was still standing on the porch watching him go. That night was no different. Long after Lucien disappeared down the road, Evelyn remained outside beneath the rising moon. A soft breeze stirred her hair. She should have gone inside. Instead, she found herself smiling at nothing. The realization arrived slowly. She missed him whenever he left. The thought should have frightened her. It did not. Later that night, after the village had fallen asleep, Evelyn sat beside her bedroom window. Moonlight spilled across the room. Her gaze drifted toward the forest. The familiar feeling returned. Expectation. A quiet hope she could no longer deny. Then movement appeared. Among the moonflowers. Her heart immediately recognized it. The black wolf stepped into the garden. Silver eyes reflected the moonlight. A strange relief washed through her. "There you are," she whispered. The wolf watched her from the same place it always chose. For several moments, neither moved. Then its gaze shifted toward the folded blue scarf resting on the chair beside her bed. Evelyn followed its eyes and immediately laughed. No, the wolf remained perfectly still. Absolutely not. The silver eyes narrowed slightly. Or perhaps she only imagined it. You already stole too. The wolf took a slow step forward. Evelyn crossed her arms. You are impossible. Somehow the creature looked entirely unapologetic. A cloud drifted across the moon. Shadows briefly filled the room. When the light returned, the chair was empty. Evelyn gasped. The scarf was gone. Once again the wolf stood near the edge of the garden with blue fabric hanging gently from its mouth. You thief, she called. This time the words carried affection she could no longer hide. The wolf paused. Their eyes met. For one brief second Evelyn felt something unusual. Not curiosity, not mystery, trust. Then the wolf disappeared into the forest. Miles away, Lucien stood on a palace balcony holding the newly stolen scarf. Moonlight shimmered across the fabric as a quiet realization settled inside him. He had traveled to Moon Hollow searching for answers. Somewhere along the way, the questions stopped mattering. What mattered now was the smile that greeted him each afternoon, the laughter waiting inside a small cottage, and the woman who somehow made the entire world feel lighter. For the first time in years, the future no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a possibility. Several days later, the quiet rhythm that had formed between Evelyn and Lucien felt as natural as sunrise. Neither spoke about how much they had come to enjoy each other's company. The truth revealed itself in smaller ways. In the way Evelyn always set out a second cup whenever she made tea. In the way Lucien found reasons to visit even when he had nowhere particular to go. The distance between them seemed to shrink with every passing day. Yet with that growing closeness came questions neither of them could fully answer. One afternoon, while gathering wildflowers along the edge of the forest, Evelyn noticed an elderly woman sitting beneath a large silver birch tree. The woman wore pale robes embroidered with moonlit threads that shimmered softly in the sunlight. Her silver hair fell in gentle waves down her back. Evelyn had seen her before at village festivals, but had never spoken with her directly. Most people simply called her the Moon Priestess. As Evelyn approached, the elderly woman smiled as though she had been expecting her. You carry the look of someone whose heart has become very busy, she said kindly. Evelyn laughed softly. Is it that obvious? To some people, no. To others, very much so. The priestess gestured toward the empty space beside her. Evelyn sat beneath the tree, surprised by how peaceful she immediately felt. For a few moments they watched sunlight dance through the branches overhead. Then the older woman spoke again. Tell me, child, have you been dreaming lately? Evelyn's smile faded. A chill of surprise passed through her. How did you know? The priestess only smiled. What do you see? After a moment of hesitation, Evelyn described the silver field of flowers, the mysterious man, and the familiar eyes that seemed to appear both in dreams and beneath moonlight. The older woman listened carefully without interrupting. When Evelyn finished, silence lingered between them. There are old stories, the priestess finally said. Stories older than kingdoms and older than crowns. Stories about souls who recognize each other long before they understand why. Evelyn lowered her gaze. Her heart began to beat a little faster. You mean destiny? The priestess nodded. Sometimes. She reached down and picked up a silver flower growing beside the tree. When two souls are meant to find one another, the bond often begins long before they meet. Dreams. Familiarity. A feeling of returning home when standing beside someone. These are not always accidents. Evelyn thought of Lucien. The way conversations with him felt effortless. The strange comfort she experienced whenever he was near. The way her heart seemed to recognize him before her mind could explain it. And if someone feels all of those things, she asked quietly. The priestess smiled. Then perhaps they should stop asking whether destiny is real and start asking why it chose them. Later that evening, Evelyn returned home carrying more questions than answers. Yet none of them frightened her. As the sun disappeared beyond the hills, she found herself sitting on the porch watching the road. Before long, Lucien appeared in the distance. The moment she saw him, a smile touched her lips without permission. And as he drew closer, something inside her settled. The same feeling she experienced in her dreams. The same feeling she experienced whenever Silver Eyes found hers. Peace. Across the yard, Lucien slowed as he approached the cottage. For reasons he could not explain, seeing her waiting there felt like the best part of his day. Neither knew exactly what was happening between them. Neither understood the thread quietly weaving their lives together. But somewhere beyond sight, destiny seemed to be smiling. The invitation arrived on a clear morning wrapped in silver ribbon and sealed with a crest Evelyn did not recognize. She stood in her cottage doorway, turning the elegant envelope over in her hands while sunlight spilled across the garden. Nothing in her life had ever arrived wrapped in silk ribbon. The sight alone made her nervous. When she finally opened it, her eyes widened. The annual Moonlight Festival would take place 3 nights later at the Grand Estate, overlooking the northern hills. Merchants, craftsmen, village leaders, and honored guests from neighboring regions had been invited to attend. Evelyn read the letter twice before lowering it. Most years she never considered attending such events. This year was different. Before she could decide what to do, a familiar voice spoke from the garden gate. "You look as though the letter contains a royal decree." Evelyn turned and smiled. Lucien was standing there. Somehow seeing him immediately made everything feel simpler. She handed him the invitation. He read it quickly before looking back at her. "Will you go?" Evelyn hesitated. "I do not know." "Why not?" She looked down at the letter. "People like me do not belong at gatherings like that." Lucien frowned slightly. "What kind of people?" Evelyn laughed softly. "The kind who spend most days covered in yarn and dye." His expression softened. "Then perhaps those gatherings need more people like you." The answer lingered with her long after he left. 3 evenings later, moonlight bathed the northern hills in silver as carriages arrived at the Grand Estate one after another. Music drifted from open windows. Lanterns glowed beneath flowering arches. Guests dressed in elegant gowns and tailored coats filled the marble courtyard. Evelyn nearly turned around twice before reaching the entrance. The simple blue dress she wore was beautiful by village standards, but standing among silk and jewels, she suddenly felt very small. For several minutes, she remained near the edge of the ballroom, watching conversations unfold around her. Laughter echoed beneath crystal chandeliers. Wealthy guests moved through the crowd with effortless confidence. No one appeared unkind. Yet she could not ignore the feeling that she did not belong. More than once she caught curious glances directed her way. Some guests seemed surprised to see a village weaver attending such an event. Others simply looked past her as though she were invisible. The old loneliness she thought she had left behind began quietly returning. Evelyn found herself wishing she were back at her cottage. Then she noticed Lucien across the room. Relief immediately spread through her chest. He was speaking with several distinguished guests near one of the tall windows. The sight surprised her. They greeted him with respect that seemed unusual for an ordinary traveler. Before she could think more about it, one elegantly dressed woman stepped beside him. The woman smiled as she spoke. Several others gathered around them. They looked comfortable together. Familiar. For the first time, an uncomfortable thought entered Evelyn's mind. She knew almost nothing about Lucien. Not really. He had appeared during a rainstorm and somehow become part of her days. Yet she had never asked where he came from. Never asked why so many people seemed to recognize him. Across the ballroom, Lucien's gaze suddenly found hers. Everything else seemed to disappear. The crowd, the music, the distance between them. He immediately excused himself from the group and crossed the room. "I have been looking for you," he said. Evelyn smiled despite herself. "You found me. I always do." The words arrived so naturally that neither of them seemed prepared for them. For a moment, they simply stood there smiling. Then laughter from a nearby group drew Evelyn's attention. Several guests were watching them, not openly rude, merely curious, evaluating, whispering. The warmth she felt moments earlier faded slightly. Lucien noticed immediately. "What is it?" Evelyn looked around the ballroom. Nothing. But it was not nothing. For the first time, she could clearly see the difference between their worlds. Lucien moved through rooms like this with ease. People listened when he spoke. They welcomed him without question. Evelyn felt like an outsider standing at the edge of a story she did not fully understand. As music filled the ballroom once more, she forced a small smile. Yet deep inside, a quiet fear began taking shape. What if destiny could bring 2 people together and still place them in worlds too different to share? The music continued long after Evelyn's smile faded. Around her, the Moonlight Festival remained beautiful. Crystal chandeliers scattered golden light across polished floors. Laughter drifted through the ballroom. Elegant guests moved gracefully beneath silver banners. Yet suddenly none of it felt welcoming. The quiet question growing inside her heart had become impossible to ignore. Who was Lucien really? Throughout the evening, she watched people greet him with unusual respect. Some bowed their heads slightly when he approached. Others stepped aside without realizing they were doing it. Even the estate's host seemed eager to accommodate him. None of it matched the story of an ordinary traveler caught in a rainstorm. Lucien noticed the uncertainty in her eyes. He had seen it growing throughout the evening. The closer they became, the harder it was to maintain the life he had borrowed. Every conversation felt genuine. Every smile felt real. Yet the truth stood between them like a shadow waiting for sunrise. As the final dance began, Evelyn stepped outside onto the moonlit terrace overlooking the hills. Cool night air brushed against her skin. The distant forest shimmered beneath silver light. For a few moments, she stood alone, allowing the silence to settle around her. Then footsteps approached behind her. She already knew who it was. "You left without saying anything," Lucien said gently. Evelyn kept her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I needed some air." Silence lingered between them. "You have questions," he said quietly. She laughed softly. "That obvious?" "To me, yes." Evelyn finally turned toward him. Moonlight illuminated his face. The familiar silver eyes met hers. The same eyes she had seen in dreams. The same eyes she had trusted without fully understanding why. "Who are you, Lucien?" she asked. The question hung between them. For a long moment, he did not answer. Not because he wanted to lie, because he no longer wanted to. "I think," he said carefully, "that you deserve the truth." Before he could continue, movement inside the ballroom drew their attention. The music abruptly stopped. Conversations faded. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Several guests hurried toward the entrance. Confusion spread across the estate. Then a voice echoed from inside. "The Alpha King has arrived." Evelyn felt her breath catch. Around them, guests immediately straightened. Some hurried toward the entrance hall. Others bowed their heads. The atmosphere changed instantly. Respect. Awe. Anticipation. Lucien closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, something inside his expression had shifted. Not distance. Not coldness. Acceptance. "Evelyn," he said softly, "please stay here." Her confusion deepened. Why? But he was already stepping away. Evelyn followed several paces behind as guests gathered near the grand staircase. The entrance doors opened. Moonlight spilled across marble floors. Royal guards entered first. Behind them came advisors, noble families, and distinguished officials from across the kingdom. Then the crowd parted. Evelyn's heart stopped. Lucien walked forward. Not as a traveler. Not as the man who drank tea beside her fireplace. Every person in the ballroom bowed. Every conversation ceased. Every eye followed him. A ceremonial cloak was placed across his shoulders. The estate's host lowered his head respectfully. "Your Majesty." The words echoed through the silence. Evelyn stared in disbelief. Her mind struggled to catch up with what her eyes were seeing. Lucien continued toward the center of the room before turning to face the crowd. Yet his gaze immediately found hers. Nothing else mattered to him. Not the nobles. Not the ceremony. Only her. "No," Evelyn whispered. The pieces began falling into place. The respect. The confidence. The secrets. The feeling that he belonged in every room he entered. He had never been an ordinary traveler. He was the Alpha King. Shock swept through her. Yet somehow that was not the only realization waiting for her. Later that night, long after the festival ended, Evelyn returned to her cottage unable to sleep. Moonlight poured through the windows. Her thoughts moved endlessly between memories and questions. Lucien's smile. Lucien's voice. Lucien standing before an entire kingdom. Near midnight, exhaustion finally pulled her into sleep. Once again she found herself standing among endless silver flowers. The moonlit field stretched beyond the horizon. This time the man was no longer hidden by distance. He stood directly before her. Dark hair. Familiar smile. Silver eyes filled with warmth. Lucien. Recognition crashed through her like a wave. Every dream. Every glance. Every impossible feeling. It had always been him. "Lucien," she whispered. He stepped closer. "I never wanted to deceive you." His voice sounded exactly as it did in waking life. "Then why did you?" she asked. Sadness touched his expression. Because I wanted one place where I could simply be myself. The dream shifted. Moonlight brightened. Silver flowers swayed around them. Then another image appeared beyond him. A black wolf standing among the blossoms. Silver eyes shining beneath the moon. Evelyn's breath caught. The wolf stepped forward. Then Lucien stepped forward. The movements matched perfectly. One heartbeat later, understanding struck. The dreams. The silver eyes. The scarf. The visits beneath her window. The impossible familiarity. The wolf and the king had never been two different souls. They had always been one. Evelyn woke with a gasp. Dawn's first light touched the horizon. Her heart raced. Tears shimmered in her eyes, not from fear, but from overwhelming realization. The man from her dreams. The traveler she trusted. The Alpha King. The wolf who kept stealing her scarves. Somehow, impossibly, they had always been Lucien. The morning after the festival felt strangely quiet, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Evelyn sat beside the cottage window watching sunlight spill across the hills of Moon Hollow. She had not slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, memories returned. Silver flowers beneath moonlight. A wolf standing patiently among the trees. A traveler smiling beside her fireplace. An Alpha King standing before an entire ballroom. Somehow, all those memories belonged to the same man. Lucien. The realization no longer frightened her. What frightened her was something else. The distance between their worlds. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Before she could reach the door, she already knew who stood outside. Lucien waited beneath the morning sky. No royal cloak. No guards. No crown. Just Lucien. For a moment neither spoke. Then Evelyn stepped aside. They sat together beside the fireplace where so many ordinary conversations had quietly changed both of their lives. I should have told you, Lucien said first. Long before the festival. Evelyn looked at him. Yes, you should have. The honesty in her answer made him smile sadly. I kept telling myself I would explain tomorrow. He lowered his gaze. Then tomorrow became another day I did not want to lose. Silence settled between them. Not angry. Not broken. Simply honest. When I met you, Lucien continued, I was tired of being a king. Tired of people seeing a title before they saw me. Then I arrived at your door soaked by rain. And you offered tea without asking who I was. His eyes softened. You treated me like a person. Evelyn felt. Tears sting her eyes. Because you were. Lucien reached into his coat and carefully unfolded a familiar blue scarf. The first one. The scarf his wolf had stolen beneath moonlight. My wolf refused to return it. A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. I noticed. The warmth between them returned immediately, familiar and comforting. Yet beneath it remained a question neither could ignore. The door opened quietly behind them. The moon priestess entered carrying the calm certainty of someone who already knew how the story would end. Her silver eyes moved between them before resting on Lucien. The time has come. Lucien nodded slowly. Evelyn looked from one to the other. For what? The priestess folded her hands. For the final choice. The room grew still. Lucien stared into the fire. The curse placed upon my bloodline was never truly about becoming a wolf. Evelyn frowned. Then what was it about? Fear. His answer came quietly. Every ruler in my family believed power required sacrifice. They chose duty over love, control over trust. The curse grew stronger with every generation. He looked at her. It remains until someone chooses differently. Understanding slowly dawned. And if you choose differently, the curse ends. Relief immediately rose inside her. Then she saw the sadness in his eyes. What are you not telling me? Lucien exhaled slowly. If I break the curse, I may lose my claim to the throne. The words fell heavily into the silence. Evelyn's heart tightened. Everything finally made sense. Lucien, he shook his head gently. I am not afraid of losing a crown. His silver eyes never left hers. I am afraid of losing you. Tears filled her eyes. For several seconds, she could not speak. Then she stood. Then do not choose me. Lucien stared at her. What? Your people need you. Her voice trembled despite her effort to remain strong. You have responsibilities. A kingdom. A future. She forced herself to smile. I never expected to become part of that future. Pain flashed across his face. Evelyn, I love you enough to let you go. The words shattered the silence between them. Lucien rose immediately. Every hesitation disappeared. Every doubt vanished. He crossed the room and took her hands in his. and I love you too much to leave. The confession hung between them. Simple, honest, irrefutable. The moon priestess smiled softly. Then perhaps it is time both of you stopped deciding what destiny can and cannot do. By sunset, news had spread across the kingdom. Nobles, advisors, village elders, and citizens gathered within the grand courtyard overlooking the northern hills. Golden light painted the stone walls. Hundreds of eyes watched as the Alpha King stepped forward. Murmurs moved through the crowd. Beside him stood Evelyn. Not hidden, not behind him, beside him. Lucien faced the gathering in silence for several moments. Then he spoke. For years I believed a ruler must carry every burden alone. His voice echoed across the courtyard. I believed sacrifice meant surrendering happiness. The crowd listened carefully. I was taught that power mattered more than love. His gaze shifted toward Evelyn. I was taught wrong. A ripple moved through the gathering. Lucien continued. A crown has value only if the person wearing it remembers what truly matters. He stepped toward Evelyn. This woman showed me more courage through kindness than I learned from years of power. Tears glimmered in Evelyn's eyes. She saw me when the rest of the world saw a title. His voice softened. She welcomed me before she knew I was a king. Then Lucien turned toward the entire kingdom. If choosing love costs me a throne, then the throne is too small a thing to keep. Silence swept across the courtyard. The words seemed to stop time itself. Lucien took Evelyn's hand. I choose her. The moment those words left his lips, silver light burst across the evening sky. Gasps rose from every corner of the courtyard. Moonlight appeared though the sun had not fully set. Warm silver radiance surrounded them both. The invisible thread that had connected them through dreams, moonlight, and destiny seemed to come alive. Lucien felt something inside him finally release. Years of loneliness vanished. Years of carrying impossible weight disappeared. Peace flooded through him. True peace. The curse was gone. The moon priestess smiled as silver flowers bloomed along the edges of the courtyard, shimmering beneath impossible moonlight. The bond is complete, she whispered. Cheers slowly spread through the crowd. Then louder, and louder still. Not rejection, not disappointment. Celebration. For the first time, Lucien realized he had never needed to choose between being a good king and being loved. 1 year later, spring returned to Moon Hollow. Wildflowers covered the hills. Laughter filled a small cottage standing at the edge of the forest. Sunlight streamed through familiar windows. Evelyn sat beside her favorite chair weaving blue moon silk, while a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers through the room. The door opened. She smiled before turning around. Lucien stepped inside, carrying something hidden behind his back. What have you got there? She asked. Nothing. His expression immediately gave him away. Evelyn laughed. That is exactly what someone says when they are hiding something. Lucien finally revealed the object. The first blue scarf. Carefully preserved. Lovingly kept. The scarf that had started everything. He draped it across her shoulders. For a moment neither spoke. Then Evelyn looked up at him with the same smile that had greeted him on rainy afternoons and moonlit evenings. You thief. Lucien laughed softly and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Maybe. He glanced toward the forest beyond the window before looking back at the woman who had become his home. But my wolf always knew where home was. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees. Inside, two hearts that had found each other through dreams, destiny, and moonlight finally rested where they had always been meant to belong.